and Dr. Lerner and I, we met each other on Twitter. We didn't even know each other in the neighborhood. We're like, oh, we live 3 houses down from each other. Very funny. Okay, so anyway, it's good to see all of you. I want to try to be as organized as possible when reading Midrash. When I first started learning Gemara, I came from America and was on a fellowship here. Here, I'm telling you a personal story now. I was on a fellowship here, and in the mornings I had started learning, and in the place that I went to start, the beginners class was run by a really old-fashioned guy. And when we sat down with him, I was like, and that doesn't matter in terms of learning Gemara, whatever, but it matters in terms of methodology. So I was ready, like, okay, let's have an understanding actually of the structure of the Talmud, how it works generationally, even what is the topic. Like, if I were teaching a kollel, a Shabbos kollel, I told you I'm going to do Ashkenaz, and I was in a Shabbos kollel, the first day of that kollel, I would say, okay, this is what a malacha is, a malacha. And there's an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi who is it, Shimon? Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Meir, I think, or whatever, about what is the nature of a malacha. Does it have to do with intention? Whatever, it's very complicated. And I was waiting for that kind of explanation, and I never got it. And not only that, I never in yeshiva did anybody explain generationally in precise terms what their hermeneutic functions are. Meaning, after a while, you learn what their hermeneutic functions are. Like I said last time, the hermeneutic function of the Tanaim, that's the first generation of the first hermeneutic category of the oral law. They're codifying the Mishnah. They're also, in some cases, using the Mishnah for psak halacha. And they create this body of 6 seders, 6 orders, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi puts it together. The idea is that Torah Shabbat Peh shouldn't have been put together, but it was anyway. It was nonetheless put together. And it's put together in such a way that I think it must be an oral tradition. I mean, the Gemara and the next generation, the Amoraim, what they do is make sense of the Tanaim. And I said this last time, and I think I have to add to it. I said that they understand the Mishnah in terms of the external statements, brises, that also exist, which are from the same generation of the Tanaim. They're also Tanaitic utterances, but they don't make it into the Mishnah. So the Amoraim, they still were said by a Tana, and the Tana is given a certain kind of authority. And if the Tana says it, it's meant to have a certain kind of coherence and authority. So you have to figure out a way in which it makes sense with the Mishnah. But in addition to that, the Mishnah itself is so internally complex and so difficult, and there's so many lacunae that the Amoraim have a lot of work to do. And therefore the tradition continues to be oral. So I'm mentioning that now. First of all, I never learned that in the traditional yeshiva world, and I think they should teach it. There's nothing heretical about it, right? To know how things work. I assume they do these things in university. And if you learn long enough in yeshiva, you know this intuitively.
That was actually part of my high school curriculum.
Right. I assume once it's part of a high school curriculum in which women are learning as well, which is already progressive, that people are thinking much more in those terms, which I think is very good. But I mentioned it also for us because I want to try to situate as much as possible what we're doing. Again, I get very tired of Jewish studies scholars because they emphasize only the wrong things, where they emphasize things that are tangential and make them central. And to me, what's central is what we're doing, which is really reading carefully. But they would really insist upon knowing the exact years. And I think if you looked it up in Wikipedia, they would probably tell you the Tanaim are from the turn of the Common Era to the 2nd century or something like that. And then the Amoraim are later sets of generations. And then there's an argument about how long they go on. I didn't really know that they go through the, Shimon, or take for anybody who knows, stop me when I'm wrong, goes through like the 8th century, right? And then there's an intermediate phase. But it gets much more. There starts to be arguments about what the next generations do. But in any event, we've been talking. What's the matter, Tigran? You don't like what I said?
I think they might go into the the 7th century at most. There's
okay,
like
okay, good. So right,
a micro generation of the Sivoraim, which like take up a century.
okay, good, good, good. Okay,
Yeah,
so right, and
I'll
so Tikva is already
stop there.
complicating the picture. After the Amoraim, there are different generations. People argue about the generations, argue about what they did, argue about their authority. You might want to know the term, and it is useful just to be familiar with the language of the Beit Midrash, of the Jewish house of study, is if the, as we said, Amoraim, an Amora cannot disagree with any Tana. That's just the rule. Can't agree with the Tana. So he will have to justify his statements in relationship to all the previous Tanaim. Not only that, he will have to show that what he's saying is necessary to be said and wasn't already said by Tanaim. But so after that generation, so that's what the Amoraim do, is they each in their way, if you're thinking in Wittgensteinian terms, which let's do for a minute, Wittgenstein talks in terms of language games, they each have their own Mishnah as a set of language games, which is internally coherent from their perspective. The next really significant generation is the Rishonim, and you've heard of people like Rashi, the interpreter of Chumash, or the Ramban, another interpreter of Chumash, or let's say, of course, the Rambam, not the end, but the M at the end, who is the halachist and also the great philosopher, the writer of the Moreh Nevuchim. So the Rishonim, so they have a different hermeneutic function, which maybe let's not go there now. But they play a significant hermeneutic function, which is different than the Amoraim. So I'm mentioning this now because we did say that the Midrash starts early with the Tanaim, and there is some Midrash halacha in which, and I was thinking more about that timeline that David Weiss Halivni gives in his book, The Sword and the Book or the Sword. It's about his whole life, which starts really in Europe and Auschwitz. Extraordinary life, but and I mentioned it last time. He says like the divine authority pulls back. So you have Har Sinai, and then you have the prophets, and then you have the writings, and then you have the Tanaim who start out having the authority to be Doresh, Darshan, the written law, and actually offer halacha on the basis of it, right? So that's called Midrash halacha. Then later generations, they stop doing that. Still, what they say is authoritative, but they don't have the power to pull their authority out from the written law. And then the Amoraim, well, they have even less authority, and they're even further away from Har Sinai. I mean, that's the way the rabbis think about it, right? They're that much further away from the moment of revelation. That makes sense, right?
So the more you are removed from the moment of revelation, the less credibility, the less authority that you have?
Well, yes and no, because as I said last time, the rabbis say that a sage is better than a prophet. So, and these are Amoraim, I think, who are saying this. So the sage will assert priority, and that's the way the rabbis affirm the importance of Torah Shebaal Peh. And that's why the rabbis say the oral law was given, the oral law is also revealed, right? The importance of that statement is they're saying really that the law only comes into the world through interpretive traditions. It's great that we had this prophetic moment, but now when we're post this prophetic moment and these prophets are no longer talking to us, the priority goes to an interpretive tradition, right? Help me out, guys. I'm really very bad at multitasking, and I just thought of two things at the same time. What were we talking about that C that you brought up?
The farther away you are from Sinai, the less your credibility.
Right. So I'm trying to understand that to make sense of that, right? I mean, we too often, or very often in the Jewish world, everything becomes mystical, right? Everything is mystical. You're further away from the mystical light. Whatever, I never understood it. I think it means, so the yes part is a sage is better than a prophet. The no part is that the interpretive traditions as they develop, they have more and more what I would call lacunae. What is a lacunae? I don't even know if I'm saying it right.
Like a gap in knowledge?
Like a gap. And we use this term in relationship to Midrash, right? Also in Halacha, there are also, in Midrash, there are all sorts, in the Tannaitic statements of the Mishnah, there are all sorts of lacunae that have to be kind of filled in. And that's why the reason that there is machloket and dispute is because no interpretation is sufficient. And this is where you have to start to understand the authenticity and honesty of the rabbinic tradition. If one perspective were sufficient, then the other person wouldn't talk. But the other person talks because it's insufficient. And I think and this is where I understand my sense of interpretation and language, is that when you're looking at complex statements that are made by, I'm going to say, great minds, it's almost impossible that one perspective will sum it up, that it calls out. And that's the rabbinic principle, which I'm sure some of you have heard. These and these are the words of the living God.
So nobody's ever wrong.
No, that is not true. It's not that, we can't say that nobody's ever wrong. And it's interesting that the Talmud does sneak in people who are outsiders, right? There's the heretic who's what's his name? Elisha ben Avuya, right? He's Acher, great stories in the Talmud about him. There's also Rav Yirmiyah, who's like very irritating the Beis Midrash most of the time, but we hear that he was once thrown out of the Beit Midrash, the Beit Midrash, right? So the Talmud incorporates these liminal figures to show not everything goes. But even more than that, I think when the rabbis say Elu be'elu divrei Elokim Chaim, it's an inclusive statement and also an exclusive statement. It's inclusive and it's these and these. It's exclusive, it's these and not those. You know, you know the picture of the duck rabbit, the rabbit duck, duck rabbit. Everybody knows that picture, right? So when you're looking at that picture, and speaking of Wittgenstein, he mentions it in Philosophical Investigations. He shows the picture, and he says, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it, you'll find it. Wittgenstein says, in very ordinary language, now I am seeing it as a duck. Now I am seeing it as a rabbit. And he's doing that for a reason. You cannot see both at the same time. You can only see it. Okay, now I am in the mental state where I see it as a rabbit. Then I switch perspectives. Oh, now I am in the mental state where I see it as a duck. So that I think is important, that they are separate places. And as I was saying before, and this is true of Talmud as well, and great works of literature as well, is that you cannot sometimes see, you can't see more than one perspective at the same time. If you become good at it, you should be able to move between perspectives. That's what, when you're not cynical, and today I'm in a surprisingly not cynical mode, that's what a Talmid Chacham is. A Talmid Chacham is somebody who can move between all those different perspectives very quickly. And he does it, and that's the reason that traditional yeshiva learning is in pairs, is because there's an understanding that the only way to learn this text is by eliciting disagreement, because the text lends itself to that disagreement, and those positions need to be articulated. That, to me, and one of the reasons I became the very religious sociological person that I was, is because I believed all the things that I was reading and learning would actually affect people. Because to my mind, this kind of learning, the kind of learning in which you're constantly having to see, oh, now I see it like Rav Meir. Now I see it like Rav Yehuda, right? Now I see it like this one. Now I see it like that one. To do that, I would have thought, well, what's built into that is appreciating a different perspective. So how is it, and this is my sociological question, which I can't really answer, how is it that the community that devotes all of their lives to learning these texts become fundamentalists, right? Kind of a crazy question, right?
Because
so that's when I became, sorry?
Because they themselves are removed from that generation.
No, but the yeshiva method, the yeshivish method is, that's what bugs me. the pedagogical methodology should lead to that. So how they close that down is very interesting, how they close that down. That's why I didn't stop. Some people, they get pissed off at the sociological reality and they leave it. I got pissed off at the sociological reality and I left that. But my commitment to understanding Jewish texts is the same, right? And the truth is I really learned that methodology very, very, the best, and I don't know if people in the non-Haredi world know this or appreciate this, but the best Haredi yeshivas, they learn on a very, very, very high level, an extremely high level. On level, and I was learning with guys for like 3 years and 10 of them. And I couldn't, and I'm the university professor and I couldn't keep up with them, none of them.
You're talking about like Litai, like the Litai?
Yeah, hardcore, yeah, Lithuanian Torah, right. Any event, so in talking about just, that's kind of a broader picture, and of course talking about machloket or dispute, we don't have to say Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim in the Mishnah, right? Only in the legal universe do you have to say that what X and not X are both true. In the world of Midrash, we're already in this world of interpretive, forgive the term, multiplicity. The text keeps on opening up and opening up and opening up. And you can see why in the 1980s, when literary theory was thriving, there was a guy at Yale, one of Dr. Feldman's former teachers, they were very, very close, really brilliant guy, Jeffrey Hartman, and he started pushing Midrash in the literary critical world, right? So it became a thing. Also, Professor Handelman, she was a major player in this. She wrote a book in the 70s, I think, her graduate dissertation called The Slayers of Moses. That's how she made her reputation, as she talked about Midrash and Talmudic discourse in relationship to Derrida, Paul de Man, Jeffrey Hartman, Harold Bloom. You don't know that about her because she pushes that part into her past, but that was a major, major book, a major book. I read it long before I met her. Anyway, so you can see why literary critics get pulled into Midrash because, especially when people are discovering French deconstruction and texts are opening up and there's all this talk about polyvalence and intertextuality. So the Midrash seems to actually be doing something as a precursor. What often doesn't get accounted for in these critical perspectives is how the Midrash functions in the Jewish tradition as a whole, right? Meaning not only as a poetic tradition, but what is the relationship between Midrash and Halacha, not only necessarily in terms of content, but also in terms of just ways of interpretation, ways of reading. Somebody's knocking at my door, just excuse me. Go, I'm in the middle of the class. You better hurry. I need a parent. Oh, you need a parent? Really? Parents no, you don't. You just needed me to sign you up. My kid he's going back to yeshiva on Sunday and he needs to get a COVID test. That's how they're doing it. They're only letting kids back with COVID tests and they're not letting them leave. Not foolproof, but such is life under Corona. Sorry about that. That was distracting. So Midrash, you can understand why it would be of interest to literary critics, but they don't understand how that Midrashic tradition fits within the legal perspective of the rabbis as well. So let's go back to where we were. That was a little bit of framing and introduction. I don't know if there's anybody who wants to ask anything about what we just said, or should we just go right into the Midrash? Let's see if I can do this properly. Let's go right into the Midrash. I learned that if I push this, that's the whole desktop that I'm getting. So that's a good thing. But I think I left a lot of things open, including my musical selections. Okay. And we also have the English. So let's look at that as well. Let's cruise through a little bit of the English. We looked at them before. Here we go. Let's start from the beginning. Okay, the Midrash cites and expounds a verse from Ecclesiastes, connecting its discussion to Solomon and his composition of 3 books. What are those 3 books, just so we can remind ourselves? I never get these right. Oh, it says Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song. What are those in Hebrew?
משלי, קהלת, שיר השירים.
קהלת ומשלי.
Yeah, and what and you know, we've talked about how in the literary world, first you write pastoral and then you write epic like Virgil and Spencer. I think the rabbis give us kind of a similar idea of the development of Solomon. Which one does he write first?
שיר השירים.
Right, and then which one does he write?
משלי.
Right, then he writes Mishlei. It's different order here, and then he writes Kohelet. Why? How do you? Why? What is that? What is that rabbinic narrative? I guess that he starts out as being a young man of passion. Then he becomes a wise man. That's Mishlei. That's Proverbs, and then there's
And then
Kohelet.
existential nihilist.
Pardon?
And then an existential nihilist.
And is that what they say?
No.
I would assume you get cheered up by Kohelet. I do. Okay, so here it goes. We're just going to run through this. Another exposition of our verse, the Song of Songs. This is to be understood in light of that which in Scripture was stated. Boy, it's hard to read in Hebrew. And in addition, Solomon was wise. He also imparted knowledge to the people. Let's continue.
But
Yeah.
are you sure we don't see the...
Oh, you don't see
Where
this
are
on that?
you-
You don't have it's not my desktop?
We
Wow.
see it, it's just really small.
It's just really small. Is that not
Oh,
bigger
no.
now?
Do Control plus.
But no, but it's not...
That's the best.
Where are you reading?
Not
Yeah.
an internet thing?
That's the
No,
best
it's
I can
big.
do. It's big now, no?
It's big enough.
That's really all I can do at the moment. So my apologies. I'm trying to be, I really realize that I have to be, in order to teach undergraduates now, you have to be very, very organized because otherwise it's all over the place. And I can be, as you know,
that's
all over
way
the place.
better.
Similarly, by drawing comparison. Oh, see,
Are you
this
sure
is-
you're reading from the same page that we are looking at?
No.
It's there, page 8, right at the top. Similarly,
Oh,
by
okay.
drawing
Oh,
comparison.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's not, we're not there though. Yeah, that's not the
Oh.
one we wanted. Let's try this one. Is my thumb in it? No. I would have thought this would be the next one. 172 though. It's 8-1. 8. Maybe I missed a page. Is that possible? Oh, there it is. Right, this
Yeah,
we
yeah.
read together. Even if someone other than Solomon would have stated the concepts contained in the book of Ecclesiastes, you still would have been advised to incline your ears and listen to these words. Right, we just look at those. What is the Hebrew for that? That you would still be hayita tzarich lachof alznecha. You would have turned your ear to listen, and we saw this very literalized metaphor. All the more so then should you listen to them, since it was Solomon, the wisest of men. So it's not only what he said, but it was because he stated it. Even if Solomon would have stated these on his own, would have stated these concepts on his own, you still would have been inclined to incline your ear and listen to them. Meaning, even if all the more so then, oh, here, this is the next part of it. All the more so then should you listen to them, since he stated them through Ruach HaKodesh, through the divine spirit. And then we have, and thus, and in addition, Kohelet was wise. He also imparted knowledge to the people. So there are two things here that are qualitatively exceptional about Kohelet. One is the words themselves have their own value, and also, so the words have their own value. That Solomon said it, his ethos, his personality gives them additional value, and even more so because he had the divine spirit. We started to discuss that a little bit last time. Let's see, is this 8-1? Oh, good. Okay, so then it goes on. The expression va'izin, should I make this bigger here? Yeah. Is referring to the words of the Torah, and the expression and investigated. So we're back in that pasuk. It is the izain. So that means, I guess, Izain divrei Torah. Oh, so the Izain is referring to the words of the Torah. That's what is being in an investing. Wait 1 second. The Izain is referring to the words of the Izain divrei Torah, the Chikir divrei Torah. Also aznaim l'Torah, and you should accordingly. Solomon. Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you about. We didn't look at this last time. Solomon made handles for the Torah, aznaim l'Torah. I'm just wondering, is there any relationship between this word here, aznaim, and before? I mean, when you look at the rabbis as poets, I think you become alive to the possibility that this repetition of words is not accidental. I'm not sure how to read it yet, right? Remember we said before, lichof aznecha, that you will turn your ear, right? And here, the handles for the Torah, I mean, we don't know what these handles are, but I mean, we're about to find that out, I guess.
But it's nice to see how we said lechof oznecha and then veizen.
So that's what I'm asking. So what? Right. So that's what I'm asking. What do you get out of that? What do you get from that?
Okay. A quick question for the people
Yes.
who speak better Hebrew than I do. What azanim, oznaim? That's handles? Because when I heard that, I thought he made ears for the Torah, which is a fascinating metaphor.
Well, so that's kind of what we're talking about right now. Meaning, we're kind of talking about that. It is, the Gemara, like Shakespeare, sometimes Shakespeare will use an and instead of a but, when he could have used the but he uses the and. And Shakespeare knew he could have used the but, and he uses an and anyway. So the question is, why does he do that? And I mean, I think Tikva, you're just pointing out there's a strangeness to this choice of word. What is there a modern Hebrew word for handles?
Yadiot.
Yadiot. Right.
Yadiot.
And I'm pretty sure that's available to the rabbis as well. So why don't they just use that?
No, because we can think of Tikva. Think of like the cup, like the Champions League cup. That has ears that you can handle, that you can hold. You know what I'm saying?
Also, it also could be balancing.
Yeah, equilibrium. Like the
yeah, right. When it says when you first said like it said izen la Torah, I was like, oh, he balanced Torah, which is a really interesting concept.
Well, but let's go with Aznaim first, right? What I mean, here could be the rabbis again. Prophecy is always understood in terms of vision, and the rabbis, when they want to call people to learn, they'll say Tashma, come and hear, right? For the rabbis, learning is very much tied to the oral, A-U-R-A-L, and they make a distinction between rabbinic learning, which is tied to hearing, and revelation, which is tied to sight. You may also know that Kabbalah, they revert to a visual metaphor. So in Kabbalah, it doesn't say Tashma, it says come and Tacha, I don't even know, it's Aramaic. Come and see, right? Tachazeh, right. So it could be the rabbis here saying, how do you learn Torah? He listed and investigated and arranged many parables. Accordingly, Asa Aznaim LaTorah. So the verse says that's the verse, I guess, we're learning right now. That he investigated and learned many parables. Is that right? I'm a little confused here. And you have the English in front of you. We'll go to the Hebrew. What?
Where are we?
We'll go to the Hebrew in a second.
You can just point with your mouse where we're reading.
Yeah, I know. I'm reading on the previous page. I'm not being fair. This part.
Okay,
right?
thank you.
Midrash expounds the second half of the verse. He invested. Okay. Okay. So this seems to be a fairly significant part of the learning here, meaning this part of this verse. And he listened and investigated and arranged many parables. Tikain mashalim. Tikain is an interesting word there, no?
I think tiken.
What do you mean tiken mashalim?
I think it means.
What does that even mean? I mean, I'm just thinking for the rabbis, tiken has to do with takana, right? Takana. It's a decree, right? So I'm kind of wondering what and we'll see.
Professor, you can also say letaken, like the taken arucha, like to fix something to eat. You know, like the. This is so
to prepare,
like to prepare. Yeah, it could also be that. I think so.
No, I think I so good, right? So it is that sense of Solomon preparing, but also that he gives this. It's like, and I mentioned the commentator, the Maharzu, which appears on the page of the Midrash Rabbah, and he says whatever. It's his commentary. He says that up until that point, people just kept the Torah because they had faith. They had faith and fear of God. Those two things. But so for him, this is really the beginning of a different way of understanding revelation. So this is a big moment, right? V'tikin divrei v'chikr divrei Torah v'asa oznaim l'Torah. So what are the oznaim? What are the handles? What am I holding the Torah with? You're stretching, Tifa, or you're not raising your hand. That would be very highly uncharacteristic. You were raising your hand?
I did. Yes, I got excited. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, let Tifa talk, then we'll come back to you, Alana.
Yeah. You're holding the Torah by metaphor.
So literally, I'm just going back to the verse. The verse says that he arranged many parables. Those parables, I mean, that the mashalim, those are the handles, and you can understand maybe Aznaim here as well, because the rabbis emphasize the traditional learning happens through hearing. Is that just a wild thing to say? What is the paradigmatic, classic biblical text that's incorporated into the Jewish liturgy? Shema Yisrael, right? Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. So it's very much hearing oriented.
You have to make yourself receptive to learning.
Right. C just gave us, of course, that was Kabbalah 101 right there, right? That there's not only a noisein, but a makabel, right? There's not only noten, but a mikabel. It's not only the person who gives, but there's the one who receives. That is the revelation of the Jewish people to the rest of the world. The revelation of the Jewish people to the rest of the world is the idea of relationship, not just the revelation. The revelation is the revelation of the possibility of relationship. Before you ask, Alana, how does that go over with you?
No, I wanted to respond to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, we had read earlier that Shlomo taught Torah,
right.
And so this is sort of what you're saying. But so im huasa oznaim the Torah, if we're not talking about that it's something of the Torah, but he just made people open to hearing the Torah. He made oznaim. He made anashim ptuchim lishma.
Very, very, very good. Right. So you see, right. You just see the poetry here, where we're discovering this poetry. Nobody reads this properly. Properly. We're experiencing this. I'm experiencing this a way in that I really haven't before. So yeah, we're just going back to the point that I made, which I think is.
So,
yeah,
Professor, so at the crux of his enterprise, of Solomon enterprise, was to establish a relationship to all kind of. That's why all
I don't. Forgive me for saying, and this is. I said this to my undergraduates yesterday as well. To me, and don't take this really the wrong way, and I think it's impossible not to take the wrong way, but to me, Solomon is the same as Achilles, meaning he's a literary creation. I'm not saying he didn't live. I'm not saying that. He lived. He was the greatest king ever, the smartest guy ever, had a Torah school, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. But Solomon he has a function in this tradition. he's being understood as this great king. And that, I'm not saying he's fictional, right? I'm not saying that. The reality that he has, though, is through the rabbinic text. So I wouldn't say it's Solomon, I would say it's the rabbis. But I was going, yeah, go ahead, Tekla.
Quick question. Well, perhaps not quick. Could you backtrack a bit and explain the revelation of the relationship thing?
Okay, so that's what I wanted to know if I made clear before. So I was what I was saying is that, you know, what did the Jews give the world? Okay, monotheism, right? But I think what the Jews give to the world maybe is, first step, the possibility. So the revelation is the Torah. But the revelation is not the Torah. The revelation is the activity, as he said, of receiving the Torah. So to me, and I know it's a little bit of a kvetch, but I like it conceptually, that the revelation is that there is a possibility of a conversation through which revelation is possible. And that possibility is, we see in Torah and in the prophets. And I think that revelation becomes, that form of revelation as relationship becomes the model for Jewish learning. And for learning in general. That there is the possibility of learning. That I can know something. That I can be in conversation with somebody and understand what they're saying.
So
now I'm thinking of the Greek soul. Yeah, but
so it's the idea of the human divine dynamic being a two-way road as opposed to a one-way road?
I guess maybe that's what I'm talking about. It's just the idea that is what's being revealed here, is that possibility that you can access the divine. Let's read the Midrash. I don't think we read these. Did we read Rav Nachman? I don't think so. So we'll read it. I'm going to read it straight through.
Can I ask a quick question first?
Sure.
To me, there's a simple way of looking at this, making handles for the Torah. I'm thinking of the expression in English, little pitchers have big ears. And I think the handles are supposed to be the ears, just like they're called ears when they're urns. So I think what he's talking about is creating a path that we can take something in. And so I like this idea of handles being a metaphor for ears.
Oh, so that's really nice. So we keep on complicating this metaphor, right? And that's why we don't have to say Elohim Chaim, because we just see that the choice of the language here is, and this is the nature of the poetic language, is that it makes us think like this. It makes us always think of other possibilities. So let's read today. Let's read Rav Nachman. So, and it goes on and says, and this, I guess, this is what the Marzu said, and you will find that until Solomon arose, there was no analogy to explain the Torah. That's weird. Right. Okay. I was just looking at the notes here to see what if it says anything interesting, which it doesn't. So let's see the first. When Rav Nachman stated two parables, Rav Nachman said, this can be compared to a large palace that has many entrances inside of it. Anyone who would enter the palace would err, toeh, when he wished to exit and deviate from the way leading back to the main entrance. Then a certain wise person came and took a coil of rope, which he hung at the way, leading to and fro from the main entrance. Subsequently, everyone would enter and exit the palace via the coil of rope. And then it says, Kach, similarly, until Solomon arose, no one was able to discern the true meaning of the Torah's words. Okay. Shall we read it in Hebrew now? Let's read it in Hebrew straight, okay?
You know, it reminds me of the Greek, what's her name in the labyrinth, in the maze?
Ariadne, I think.
Ariadne.
What happened? You didn't learn that from me because I don't know that. What happened to Ariadne in the maze?
There is like a centaur, what do you call the monster there?
Minotaur.
Minotaur,
Minotaur.
yeah.
Yeah, the maze. The maze is
The
built.
trail of breadcrumbs.
This is the trail of breadcrumbs. Okay. Okay.
The maze.
Okay. Right. So
Go on, Ben. What do you say, Ben?
why? So, but why are we in the maze? Because we're not because there's so many different perspectives that are opening up.
Because Torah is complicated and you can get lost. I mean, look at the
Okay.
Gemara.
Is that
They
what
do
you
a
were
great
saying? See,
job of
that
getting
that's simple.
lost.
You know, I was just saying that he evokes the Greek myth. That's what I was saying.
No, I got that part. Yeah, I got that part. Right. Okay. Okay. So let's. Here's the pasuk. Until Shlomo came about, there was no such thing as a dugma. What does a dugma mean? What is it? Why it's Greek here, right? That is Greek, I assume. No.
Dogma is dogma, you think?
No, I don't think so. The Eitz Yosef, the kind of Rashi of the Midrash says, Dimyun umashal lahavin al yado tochen ha'inyanim. One more time. Dimyun umashal lahavin al yado tochen ha'inyanim. So it's an imagination or a story that is used to understand, that by its means one can understand tochen ha'inyanim. How would you translate that?
Well, wait, it doesn't
content.
just mean example.
Pardon?
Sorry, but
The
it
essence.
doesn't just mean example.
See, I can't hear Ben. Ben, speak up a little bit.
I said it doesn't just mean example. Dukma.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, this guy, the Eitz Yosef,
it's hard to know because
compelled to talk. He feels compelled to talk here. So for some reason, he's not happy with that. And really, and this is another thing which has to do with hermeneutics and interpretation is, right, on the one hand, I'm not sure in this case, but let's say Ben is the pashtut, right? It makes sense literally, it's dogma. Let's say, I'm not sure that's right, but let's say that's right. But the context dictates that we have to say something else. That's why Eitz Yosef talks. It can't just be dogma because that's not what we're talking about, as we'll see from the stories that come, right? But it's interesting. So here, and the Eitz Yosef, I think, is useful here, that this idea of an imaginative thing or a story to understand through its means hatochen ha'inyanim, the content of the thing. So until Shlomo was around, there's no such thing like that. Rav Nachman Amar Tartin, he said two things. Rav Nachman Amar lepalatim gadol shayu patachim harba. So there's this big palace that has many entrances. So what does this mean literally? And anyone who went in inside of it, he would make a mistake. How would you translate that idiomatically?
Straying, not straying. Lost.
He got hayatoa miderech petach, but he couldn't find his way back out. Is that what we're to understand here? I mean, that's already not literal.
He erred. How do you say this?
He erred or whatever. Yeah.
Erred? No. What's it called? He strayed from the path. He strayed from the path leading back to the entrance. Right.
I mean, so it's not just he strayed. The miderech petach is not just idiomatic that he strayed. He can't find his way back out. Bapikeach echad, v'natal hapakaat, v'tala derech hapetach. How did we translate that before?
It's a coil, papkat.
A certain wise person came and took a coil of rope, which he hung at the way leading to and fro from the entrance. So what is the coil? The pakat, the tala, or he hung it up, derech hapetach. Hayakol nichnasim v'yotzim derech hapakaat. So they all came and went by means of this coil. Kach, ad Shlomo lo haya adam yachol lahaskil divrei Torah. V'kevan she'amad Shlomo hitchilu hakol sovrin Torah. Lo haya adam yachol lahaskil divrei Torah. A person was not able to understand the words of the Torah. And because he began this, everybody, this is also a strange word, Hakol Sovri Torah. What does that mean?
Everyone has their opinion.
What is so? What does sover? If it had to, what would we say? What does sover mean in this context?
Hypothesize. I don't know. That's
Shimon, what would you say? Shimon Lerner, what would you say?
I feel like it means everyone can think about, or
Yeah,
everyone
right. I mean,
could
what I mean,
understand.
I said, but why doesn't it say that everybody understood it?
no, but
Right.
that's their
That would
language.
be-
No,
It's
but
it's
because the shorashim are different. The shorash of lahavin is about mevin davar mitoch davar. It's about being able
Okay,
to
good. So
make
good.
your
So you're
own
telling me that.
conclusions.
So what is sover? Tell me. Give me as an analytical an explanation of what sovrim means. Right. I mean,
I
you
don't
said
understand it as well as
lahavin
Bina.
davar l'toch davar is already. I mean, it's pshat, but also a little. But whatever.
Yeah.
You know. So I want to know what are the connotations of sovrim. I also think we should just pull back. What are we explaining here? Why is Rav Nachman talking? What is his job here?
I think that dogma can be metaphor. And
In
metaphors, so people could understand and interpret and find their understanding in the Torah.
Just help me here. What are the connotations of sovrim in Hebrew? So I thought it had to do more. Hypothesize?
Yeah, postulate, posit, theorize. Like it's very subjective. It's a svara. It's not established. It's only svara.
Right.
It's not established yet.
See, a good svara is like revelation, right?
Yeah,
So you shouldn't say just. You shouldn't say just a svara. But I hear what you're saying, because as my old teachers used to say, a svara, when you're trying to understand something that you're reading in the Tanaim or the Amarim, it's a dime a dozen. You come up with lots of different svaras. To get a good one, to have one that's really appropriate. So I understand that. I mean, svara is not, I wouldn't say, I hate the word subjective, but it does seem to allow for that kind of subjective component. I call sovering Torah. But just going back, why is Rav Nachman here talking? He offers two parables, right? What is he giving a parable about?
That Solomon was able to explain things in a way where people had greater understanding. And before that, it seems to me that it was just
right. I think you're already being a little bit too conceptual. Not that, I mean, what you said is that you really explain things, but what Rav Nachman is explaining, there was no metaphor, there was no analogy. So
He didn't teach them Torah. He gave them the tools to learn Torah themselves.
Well, you're doing the same thing that Sherry's doing, which is right. I mean, that's you're understanding it. But what's happening here, just formally, is Rav Nachman is now providing two parables to explain the beginning of parables, right? I mean, talk about meta, right? Here we have Rav Nachman, who is offering parables to explain the origin of parable and the origin of poetry. That's how I'd like to think of it.
Yeah.
But I see the rabbi. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah. It's just it's exact meta. The word meta. Yeah.
Right. It really is the word meta, right? So right. So Rav Nachman here he's coming here. He's I think the rabbis here in this part of the Midrash, right? And it might be contradicted by a billion other things in other parts of the Midrash, not contradicted, but complemented. In this part of the Midrash, Solomon invents poetry. And he invents sacred poetry, right? Solomon invents sacred poetry, and Rav Nachman is coming to explain what that sacred poetry is. Again, we have more work to do here. We don't know what sovereign means exactly, although we do understand that there is this subjective component now that it's being opened up to everybody, right? Solomon is the first exoteric Jewish figure. You know what exoteric means as opposed to esoteric?
Or maybe the first exoteric pedagogue.
Esoteric is secret, right? Exoteric is made for everybody. Rav Soloveitchik of the last generation, he emphasized this aspect of being a teacher, that you can, the Jewish tradition can, it's an attack on Kabbalah, it's an attack on a lot of things, but it's also this faith in a pedagogy, which is you need to teach for everybody. So, and I guess this is how Solomon is being represented here. One second, Delano, just remembering last time that Solomon, we saw, he is attributed to have Ruach HaKodesh because, again, he's in relationship, that he talks to the Am, right?
You know, Professor, there is in Pirkei Avot, they say, Kol sheruach habriot nocha imenu, ruach hamakom nocha imenu, which is kind of...
Just tell us that in English.
Everybody that the one that the spirit of the people is lies with him, the spirit of the Holy Spirit is with him.
Okay, right. That is in order for the Holy Spirit to be with you, you have to be in that relationship. So yes, yeah.
I don't know if Aramaic is appropriate here, but the shoresh samech bet resh in Aramaic is permission, to give permission. So
bet resh. How do you know Aramaic?
Sabri, when you do the kiddush and you say Sabri, bereshutchem.
Sabri, right?
It's bereshutchem.
So what is that?
So if you have svurim here, then it might be that it's nagish, that it's accessible to everyone. Sheyesh ishur for everyone to study.
No, it's calling out, Sabri. Okay, good, nice. So let's just get back to this mashal. So what are we, once we read this mashal, let's go back to the tenor, as it were, of the mashal. What is a tenor? A wise person came and took a coil of rope, which he hung at the way leading to it. Yeah.
Interrupt. I just looked at the Savri Maranan that Elena just mentioned, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
And Savri Maranan is just to listen, like to draw the attention. So Savri is something like listen to me. I don't know. That's what it says.
Very nice.
On Google.
Let's
Google.
So right. Oh, good. Google can be your friend. So, all right. So how does he make it possible? Now we're going on to what Tikva and Sherry said. How does he make it possible that learning that wisdom becomes accessible, that Torah becomes accessible? So let's what I'd like to do is try to just understand what he's saying with this particular metaphor.
By telling a story. Just think of the original story that we all know about Solomon. He was able to drive home the point of why he made a ruling by telling a simple story, and we all saw the wisdom in that.
You mean which the child?
The two mothers, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The power of the mashal.
No, but so what I'm asking, Sherry, is what about this particular mashal? That's what I'm asking. What that was very beautiful what you said, but now I'm asking about the specificity of this language. So they were not able to find their way back. So somebody came, we know that Shlomo. He took this coil, and he held it down to the door. So from that point on, I really don't get it now. I mean, that's the strangeness of this is coming to me.
I think because there's lots of information that you can wade through, but it takes a wise person to weave it together to have it make sense and to show the way to the other people. So I think this coil.
You're still ahead of me, Sherry. I think what when it says Hayatom Miderech Pesach, what happened to these people? What I'm asking is to think of the tenor of this metaphor, right? In terms of to think of the vehicle of this metaphor. By vehicle, we're talking now about somebody with a coil, right? In some kind of building, with there are lots of entrances. Oh, I see. I'm trying to understand the vehicle in terms of the tenor, meaning who is this guy? What is he doing when he's reading in the wrong way?
They're all lost, and that's where he comes in with his coil.
No, I get that. So I'm just trying to understand that.
Okay, then I'm not. Then I'll.
No, everything you're saying is right. I'm just trying to understand what. So they're all lost. Good, let's go with it. They're all lost. They can't find their way back. So somebody comes along. And what I'm asking is, what does it mean to be lost as an interpreter? What happened to these people? They couldn't find their way back. But now they can find their way back because Solomon provides a coil. What does this coil mean? It's a singular thing, right? So what do they hold on to it? So they all came in together and they all went out together. They couldn't understand it. I just don't get that. How does that come out of it?
I think it's the difference between disparate pieces of knowledge and assembling them into wisdom. And
so one second. So I'm going to push you here, Sherry. So the assembling into wisdom is the coil?
Yes.
So again, I want to just focus and hear other people now on this coil because it's not clear to me as well. I'm just going to say it one more time for myself, right? So there's this coil, and this coil, it's obviously a metaphor, but we're trying to understand, well, what does it mean? They all got lost and they couldn't find the entry that they came in from. But why does the Midrash say that there were lots of entrances? Did they leave through the wrong entrance? And what would have been wrong with that? What would have been wrong if they left through the wrong entrance? Why would that be bad? And now this guy comes in and he provides this metaphoric coil. Now, the way I think of the metaphoric coil is he went in and he showed us the direct path.
Yeah.
And now we can all pull ourselves out of that direct path.
It's kind of a John Lockean, figure, like enlightenment.
Why?
Because before the pre-Solomonic, I don't know how to call it.
God, Solomon's great. You sound like a modern Orthodox rabbi. Go for it. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not. Can you help me articulate? I think you.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, say what you were saying. See it. Go on with it. Yeah.
I haven't. I'm just.
So before Solomon, what happened to people? They would go in and not come out themselves. They would go in and not come out the same people. There is this idea, I hear this, they're getting lost, but they can't find their way back to the entrance. They can't find the way they came back in. It's weird to me because it just seems like, I thought Mashal was going to open up to a world of multiplicity. And here it seems like everybody's going in the same way and coming out the same way as well. That doesn't make sense. I wasn't expecting that. That's what a mashal does, or maybe it's the mashal in general. I don't know. Maybe it's the mashal in general. That is the coil. Is the mashal the coil that brings you in and out safely? Is that a way of reading it? See, Sherry, I'm grateful for everything that you said, but I'm just trying to be more specific in exactly why this particular metaphor is used. Meaning in poetic terms, and my students know this from just our classes together, I don't want to get rid of the vehicle so quickly, right? The vehicle meaning the apparatus, the mashal itself, right? Remember the Eitz Yosef said last time, the mashal serves to sweeten the words of Torah, to make them more accessible. So I'm wondering, I don't want to, and that's really this whole sugya is about this, about how the mashal has a particular power. And we'll see next time, the next set of midrashim deal with this very question of, well, what is the status of this story? Is it something just like, oh, well, I needed it and I'm going to throw it away? Or is there something about it which has interpretive value? Both of us, I see Shimon is nodding because the Rambam in the Mor Nevuchim brings this midrash because he's very interested in this question. What is the role? So we're getting to that here. And I think the fact that it's a machloket means it's complicated, right? The fact that it's a dispute that that there are two midrashim brought, both of those midrashim are right. On the one hand, it doesn't matter. On the one hand, it matters a lot. So that's what I'm asking here is, what is the coil doing? Yes, Alana. You're muted, Alana.
I just wanted to say bye. I have to go. I'm sorry.
Right, I know. We're finishing anyway. And one thing I want to tell everybody, Zoom means never having to say you're sorry. Okay, you can say goodbye in the chat, or it's all good. Okay. So we'll end with this, and maybe we'll come back to this the next time we meet. But what do we think? I need some help here. What do we think about this coil?
I think in a way it allows us to treat the material as an intellectual exercise, and I don't necessarily have to immerse myself and adopt everything completely. I can analyze it analytically from a distance.
And the guy who gets lost, he gets completely immersed in it, and what happens to him? Because he doesn't do what you said, what happens to him?
I'm not sure, but he changes somehow. And then people will be afraid to approach the material if they see that they won't even bother to.
I see. So he comes at a different entrance, maybe, and he seems transformed in some way which makes us uncomfortable. And I was thinking,
it could be good for him even maybe when he gets transformed, but it's scary for people to go.
I hear, and that makes sense, especially in terms of this whole thing, which is all about pedagogy, right?
Yeah.
I was wondering, and I don't know this midrash well, and everybody knows it. I think, superficially at least, that story about everybody, these Tanaim, these early rabbis go into this pardes, right? And one goes crazy. They go into this realm, this pardes, and only Rabbi Akiva comes out unscathed. Is that right? More or less? Yeah. Only Rabbi Akiva comes out unscathed, and it shows the way, as Shimon is saying, that interpretation is it can be dangerous. Doesn't somebody go out of their mind, right? Yes. What do you know? Yeah, what are the other ones?
There was Ben Zoma, and there was Ben Azai, I think, and Acher.
And Acher, right? The one we were talking about before, right? So that makes a little bit more sense here, right? So why is it that up until this point, it's really, you can see it's all about pedagogy, right? Up until this point, people had faith, right? They didn't need anything else. But at a certain point, Solomon realizes that his people need to be connected to. It's kind of like, too bad Tikva is not here. It's kind of like women in Torah learning in America, right? At a certain point, women are not going to be happy getting, as they do among Satmar, they don't even get to read Torah. They just get like handouts with verses on it or explanations on it. So there's a certain point that parts of the population are no longer going to be satisfied unless they have a personal relationship to this text. But we see in other places throughout Midrash and Pirkei Avot also that Torah itself is not, and we see in this Midrash also, it's compared to a boiling kettle. It can be dangerous, right? And that's another way. And this may be, as Shimon is saying, this is showing that going in on your own can be dangerous, and it may change you. And as Shimon said, it may be good for you, but that's not what Solomon wants, because Solomon is not thinking about just you. Solomon is thinking about everybody. So if he's going to institute here, and maybe this Midrash here is suggesting the tenuousness of this, how difficult it is. And I think the single coil is, well, Midrash, which of course it's kind of a paradox really, because the coil is being compared to Midrash, and the coil is one thing, but the Midrash is something that's, which is just keeps on exploding, which is multivalent. It goes on and on and on and opens up. So maybe that singularity of the coil is meant as a kind of, almost, if you're John Donne, a metaphysical contrast, right? You get these two things at the same time. The singularity of the vehicle is one coil, but that coil itself, I mean, maybe that coil itself we could think of as poetry. What else would people have been doing? If maybe if you were trying to go in like that, you would go crazy. Oh, like when you go into a non-linguistic field, right? You go into this mystical reality. Well, that's dangerous. And here for Solomon, or for the rabbi's version of Solomon, is the means to doing that is Midrash. Here, we'll finish with this. I'll just read it to you. This is the Eitz Yosef. As I said before, he's kind of the Rashi to the Midrash Rabbah. And he says, this is on Yachol Lahaskil Divrei Torah. Only after that were people, this is the first part. Lo Adam Yachol Lahaskil Divrei Torah. A person they couldn't understand Torah. Vahatam, the reason is, Ki Shorsh Chachmas HaTorah Hu Ruchani. The shorish of the Torah is, I hate this word, spiritual, Ruchani Ma'ot. Ve'ein B'kochu Lahasigo Ki Im Al Yedei Dugma Umashal Gashmi. Here is a poetics, one more time. And the reason is that the origin of wisdom, the source of wisdom is Torah, which is in a high spiritual level. It's a Platonic form. Ve'ein b'kocho lahasigu, and a person doesn't have the power to acquire it, ki im al yedei dugma, except by means of a dugma, metaphor, mashal, gashmi. But you can see Eitz Yosef is a later thinker. He's really a dualist, right? There's the Ruchani, and there's the Gashmi. But the only way, and it is useful, that dualism is useful, the only way to bring down the revelation is through a physical story. I mean, it really is a paradox, and it really is worthy of John Donne, right? Because the Torah is, help me explain this, because the Torah is so divine and on such a high level, the only way you can explain it is stories. What?
And what is the connection to Donne that you drew?
So we didn't study Donne together. So Donne and 17th century poets, they bring opposite things together. They bring things together. So Donne will write a poem about romantic love, or sex really, and compare it to
twin compass.
Right, or compasses, or more radically, for some people, uses theological language to describe love and even sex, or will use sexual language to describe faith, right? And people in the 18th century freak out about that. Dr. Johnson, right? Dr. Johnson said that Donne took the most heterogeneous ideas and yoked them by violence together. In a way, I'm finishing 1 second, yeah? In a way, this is what's happening here in, let's just close the door, I'll be in 1 minute. In a way, this is what is happening here, right? You have the highest spiritual thing can only be embodied physically. What? How do we get there? Anyway, I gotta go, my kid needs to get a COVID test. So thank you very much for coming. I can come back, let me just see what he wants, and maybe I'll come back, 1 second. Yeah, what? Yeah, what? I'm coming. Is there a card here? It's a crisis. One more question and then I'll go. Ben, did you have a question?
No, I mean,
no.
Many, but.
Yeah, so next time, go ahead.
I said many, but nothing to verbalize at the moment.
Okay, so next time what I'd like we'll do, and we'll see when we can pull this off, is to look at the next part of Rav Nachman and also the next two pieces that the Rambam brings, which is really about the whole function of the vehicle of a metaphor, the whole function of poetry. The Rambam has he's got his own business that he's doing there, but it'll be interesting to look at. So thank you very much for coming. I'm going to go and do what I'm supposed to do as a father. I'll speak to you soon. Yeah.
Can I have just a minute before you go?
Yeah.
So anyway, no, it's not about the class. It's just about my
All right, so let's meet later. Okay, I'll send you a link. Okay. Okay,
All right,
I gotta go. Bye.